Hey guys, today I just want to talk about the cumulative effects of A/B testing over time. And the purpose is really to give a demonstration with a fairly simplistic model of what continuous testing, higher frequency of testing versus occasional testing versus no A/B testing really has in terms of impact and performance over time. So I have three modeled elements here for pop-up capture in terms of list growth as well as general contact engagement and revenue potential, campaigns, and flows. They're operating under the same underlying model assumptions. And before we begin, basically the assumptions are that it's fairly linear over time. Of course, a more sophisticated model would be something like a Monte Carlo analysis, mapping all of the scenarios of when each test may fail or succeed. But for our demonstration purposes, just sticking with a simple model to hit home the point here. So first off, I have just some basic assumptions here. We can even take this down a little bit. Baseline capture rate for your pop-up lead capture pop-up at 4%, and monthly pop-up views at only 10,000 here. Value per subscriber, usually this one's probably a lot higher, so I'm going to move that to like $5 over the lifetime. Continuous test twice per month compared to like once every 3 months or once a quarter or so. Tests that reach significance only about 60%, and winner challenger winning those 60% of tests that reach significance only about 40%. Average lift per winning test about 8%. Looking at, let's just do a 12-month horizon here, and capping the capture rate at 20%. So if we looked at it this way, then what you can see here is the baseline will still be 4%. If you do occasional testing, it basically doesn't get you very much at all, a 0.3 raw percentage lift over a 12-month period. Whereas if you do the continuous two tests per month, then you're actually getting a raw 2.2% lift, which is, what's that, more than 50% relative lift there over time. Additionally, cumulative revenue. This, of course, scales with your volume numbers and some of the capture rates. And so a lot of variables you see down there. But we're seeing about a 7K lift versus like barely any lift if you do occasional testing. And of course, the baseline, you're not seeing anything. Now, the interesting part is just like with investments and compounding interest over time, if we extend out the time horizon, let's say by 2 years here to 36 month, you're going to start seeing a bit of a exponential growth here. So over that time period, now we're really differentiating here, and we're getting about an 81K lift, which is quite significant over this time period. It's actually more than double the baseline. Whereas if you do the occasional testing, you're really not, you're seeing a little bit of lift, but nothing too significant. So not only is the frequency of testing really important in generating the lift, perhaps more so than even the potential variables you're testing, because when you do the frequency, then you have higher, more at bats and higher chances of like realizing the wins. And as you can see built in our model, like not all tests reach significance and not all of them are winning. So it's kind of key to have the frequency of testing be higher. And then also, the earlier you start, the better because of the compounding effect and realizing the gains over time. If you can capture the lift like earlier in the life cycle, then you're going to have a better chance of seeing this model number or potentially even higher. So that carries across to like campaigns, to flows as well. You can see here we have modeled the revenue per recipient over time. And yeah, you can play around with the numbers, but for here I put some fairly reasonable numbers for smaller e-commerce stores. So 50,000 engaged list size, two campaigns per week, so 8 per month. Revenue per recipient at 10 cents, two tests versus one test every other month, basically. Only half of the tests reaching significance, and only a third of those significant tests having a challenger winner, and only a 6% relative lift per test over a 24-month horizon, and we'll cap the revenue per recipient. And even here, you can see that we've grown over that time the revenue per recipient significantly, like more than 50%, like 52% there. And the cumulative revenue you can see here is like 243K relative to baseline, 243K additional relative to a baseline of 960. So very similar stories. Flows can tell the same story as well. Of course, the differential here is really dependent on whether flows or campaigns make the majority of your revenue in an optimized steady state. And that can differ from brand to brand, industry to industry. But nevertheless, I think the main takeaway here is test early, test often, and that's going to give you the most likely probability of realizing quite a juicy lift over a short time horizon as well as over the longer time horizon where you're actually going to see compounding lift there. So anyways, that's about it. Thank you guys.